Hello friends, Jennifer Pearson here, Thistle Gypsy, and this is the last of my dark deck interview type decision making videos. um, when I got to the end, when I was doing an evaluation of all of the decks that I had done the dark deck interview with, and was looking at which ones I would keep and which ones I would let go, there remained in my mind a question about whether I needed to keep this deck, thinking that maybe the Heal Yourself reading cards could do an effective grief spread, and that I then would not need this deck for that purpose. And I thought, all right, so I'm going to create, because this is why, well, it's a big reason why I got this deck is its focus on grief. Its stated focus on grief. But when I looked in here, because I thought, well, I'll do a grief spread and I'll use each of these decks and see if one, rises above the other. And I was hoping that maybe there would be a spread based on the ideas of grief expressed in here. This whole grief processing with denial, anger, bargain, depression, that kind of stuff. There is no spread in here. There is no spread, which put me in a position of having to come up with my own. And so what I came up with is 3 questions. So I'll just read them to you now to get you oriented in what we're about to do here. Number 1 is, what dark view of life is triggered in me when people die? So this is my big, this is when I'm aware of the grief that's inside me, is when someone, and it doesn't have to be somebody I'm close to, if I'm at a funeral of a stranger, just the grief of the people around me. And I'm not going to say that I'm an empath, and no, I think I have a grief problem. I'm not sure what it is, but it's like, the people who were closer to the person than I am, they're not crying, and I'm, maybe it's not a grief problem. I have a death problem. Anyway, so that's, and I've thought about it some, and again, it could be a view of life. It's, I turn it back around at me and think, well, am I, is there, am I somehow so unfulfilled in life that I'm projecting their death onto me somehow, and like some sort of, like how sad that they should die before X, Y, or Z. Again, these are people I don't even know, so they may have lived perfectly fulfilled, happy, lives. so there's that. And then the other question I've had is like, am I not properly processing the own grief in my life, such that when it's just even minutely, it's like a pinprick on a balloon or something that's full of water and it just all gushes out. So my question number 2 is, what dark aspect of life am I avoiding when I fail to acknowledge the smaller griefs and pains of everyday life? And I will put these questions down in the description box of the video. So, what am I letting accumulate, and why would I let it accumulate? I can think of practical reasons why I would, but not kind of, what the kind of the emotional I completely lost the word. Anyway, maybe it was the emotional implications of not, or maybe the emotional impetus to not process that I do have a pretty stable life, so I'm not sure what I would be grieving, but certainly there are some things. So number 3 is what grief, we have an invader. What grief do I need to process now that I'm in denial of? So maybe I just routinely disconnect from smaller griefs and pains of everyday life. And, so I'm not staying on top of it, so to speak. I'm not even, it's unconscious. My way of dealing with it, of burying it, is just an unconscious process. And so this number 3 is designed to bring that out. All right, so we're starting with the dark mirror. One card for each. Things got a little out of control with the reading, heal yourself reading cards. They were giving me extras. So, but let's go ahead and do this. So number 1, what dark view of life is triggered when people die? And yes, boy, that makes a lot of sense. Fated to suffer. Why, somehow I just think that either, I don't know if I think that the people had suffered, that, maybe I equate death with suffering. I don't know. So let's read a little bit about that. I actually didn't, I pulled the cards, but I didn't look into the guidebook. That's 25. So it says feeling confined into a script. Well, I don't feel that. It is really genuine, sort of out of control need to grieve or cry. Never, what? Heading towards, well, it says feeling confined into a script, forced by other and never really fought. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Heading toward a destination of pain. So I wasn't raised with religion, so I would not say that I imagine that like these people are going to hell, or, I mean, really their suffering is over. It's the suffering of the people who are left that, well, it is just the loss of the person, just an awareness of the tragedy of a life lost. So let's see what it says. Once upon a time, we believed in fairy tales. They were the voice of common sense, the educational tool which prepared us to duty, danger, and morals. Some things we would never accept if they were told by a single voice, so the world arranges us to hear them in 1,000, or with 1,000 voices. 1,000,000 voices. It's about what you can do and what you can't do. What are you worth? What can you aspire to? It's about what you like, what you want, what you hold dear. It creates a script which becomes as strong as all the voices that believe that script combined, so much that you cannot see another path. So maybe that script is that notion that death is a tragedy. And I have a hard time with it not being a tragedy. It is a tragedy. that's my script. I don't know if I'm getting it from others or what, but are you truly seeing Snow White in the card? In this story, truly the only one that this image can tell is this story truly the only one that this image can tell? What if the apple is not poisoned? What if the witch is not evil? Is that the same as what you look? I'm not, this is one of those sentences that wasn't translated well. Um, yeah, I'm going to skip that one. Is it truly what you think it is? Are there any other options? Is the option of others honestly better than ours? Even if they are many and we are only one. Are you fated to suffer? It is not that there is no suffering in the world. The point is that there is no fate. Um, I don't know. I mean, I think that, you know, this kind of gets to the point to some extent with the fated to suffer, that there is, but what I just read in the book doesn't help me really understand the fated to suffer. Is it that so this is a dark view of life that is triggered in me when people die? So, you know, is simply the exiting the suffering, the separation, you know, kind of the, you know, it's gone forever, this person is gone forever, that I can't accept. So I'm not sure if I'm supposedly believing that they are fated, or we all are fated to suffer, or that death is any kind of suffering. I mean, you would think I could have a better attitude. I mean, I'm pretty like unemotional in other aspects of my life. It just only comes out with that one thing. Now, I have looked into this, my relationship with death and grief, in past lives, that showed a lot of reason why death would bring up like just a myriad of deaths in which I felt helpless, to help the people who were dying. So, you know, it could just be a past life trigger sort of thing. Um, Number 2, what dark aspect of life am I avoiding when I fail to acknowledge the smaller griefs and pains of everyday life? So there is an assumption there that I am avoiding, or that there is some dark aspect behind that avoidance, the avoidance of processing smaller griefs. And it says Parasite. Really don't get Parasite out of this card. Well, maybe there's a vine. Vines can be parasitic. So let's see what that is. 19. When the only answer to lack of self-efficiency is to cling to another one. What can't survive alone will seek company. I guess even if it's parasite company. But instead of growing together, they will wither together. That's a dark sentiment. Instead of growing together, they will wither together. So I'm not quite seeing the smaller griefs in there. But let me read on. So this might be a long video. Relationships are not a zero-sum game. Of course, using each other is part of the game, but it's quite different when use takes the shape of supporting rather than manipulating or exploiting. In the long run, a good relationship is a win-win, where the more I give, the more I get, and the other way around. Still, it's not always like this, is it? not just in bad relationships. In the short run, bad is bound to happen even in the house of true love. We cling, we bite, we hunger for safety and freedom and support. And on the other side, we get mangled, bitten, demanded on. Well, it happens. It happened and it will happen again. It is part of the game. All right, so it's saying, I guess there's a level of acceptance that they're asking for here, I'm guessing. But if it happens too much, it creates a toxic environment. It doesn't matter if we are the victim or the perpetrator, as poison is shared equally. One gets the pain, another one gets the advantage, but the toxic part they both get fully. A parasite, a leech, kills itself as much as it kills the host. It sacrifices the journey to the destination, and then the destination to its own failures. The problem is not living as sheeps, but the true problem is living as a sheep for 100 years. Oh my. So that's kind of cryptic and weird. So it was kind of talking about, cycles, you can expect things to come around. So what dark aspect of my life is functioning, or am I avoiding when I fail to acknowledge this stuff that always comes around and comes back around, and here it comes again? So I almost feel like I feel like it's shown me the little things that keep coming back around. Maybe the acceptance of that is the dark thing. I just accept that these difficult times are going to come back around because I'm fated to suffer. And so maybe that acceptance is in fact the dark aspect of life. I don't know. Because, the way I phrase the question is, what dark aspect of life am I avoiding? Well, I could see that. So if this is a clinging vine, a parasitic clinging vine, then it could be that I'm not wanting to let these little things get to me, because that's what a vine is, right? It has little tendrils that it grabs onto things. And so it is kind of insidious. So maybe I just, and my thinking is that I'm letting things go. All right, so that didn't work out the way I wanted to, so let's just move on here. Let's just let it go, not let it cling and um, grow, and get too poor me about it. So that, stoic sort of attitude that prevents me from fully grieving the small things in life. I could see that, I might need some kind of ritual, allow yourself a pity party rituals so that I can kind of process things, that when I just tell myself that it's like, all right, well, that's that. I guess we move on. Question number 3. What grief do I need to process now? So what grief do I need to process now that I'm in denial of? Oh, the temple of the body. And this is certainly how I've been affected, sorry about the glare, by Lyme disease. There's like no doubt in my mind what this is. So that's clear as a bell. So we kind of had, this one was a struggle to get to, and the book wasn't very helpful. But these two made some sense. That just in general, it didn't really help me understand it better particularly, but it's like certainly fated to suffer would be part of, that grief reaction, feeling that inevitable suffering, that inevitable loss, just hitting me really hard somehow. Even though it's not necessarily hitting other people. It's hard. Of course, people that are close to the person could still be in shock. I just don't know how people process everything they need to process. And I'm not even talking emotionally here. I'm talking about all the demands on the loved ones when a person does pass away. So now we're going to move on to these, and I'm going to have to look at them for a second to see, because some of them there was, yeah. I think well, I know this was the first one, and I think it was the second question. There were 3. And the last question, there were 2. Okay. So Phoenix Rising, this is the answer to the first question. What dark view of life is triggered when people die? What dark view of life is triggered in me when people die? And let me just go back and Phoenix Rising. So I would think this would be a positive card. But let's look at it, and let's look at the reversed meaning. It could be, I don't think of this as a dark aspect, but it could be me wishing that I could bring them back to life or something. All right, Phoenix Rising. Everything in your life is falling apart in order for you to rise from the ashes with renewed strength. So maybe it would be this, that I don't believe that. I fundamentally don't believe that. This is not a time to create, and this particular book doesn't have reversed meanings. This is not a time to create, but a time to sweep away everything that has not worked in your life. The reason so many things are breaking down and not going your way is because the old cycle of your life is completing. So maybe my fundamental problem is that I can't deal with endings. I would say endings that I'm not in control of. Because I will create endings, I will leave a person, I will leave a city, I used to roam a lot, and of course that is all kinds of endings. You leave your job, you leave your house, you leave the people that you've come to know. But if it's somebody else that is doing the leaving and there's some situation that I'm not in control of, um, and we're not in control of death. So, hard to say, but I might explore that in sometime in the future. You may feel that you are walking through the fires of life right now in order to be cleansed and purified for your rebirth. Soon you will not recognize yourself. You are reclaiming your spirit. So this is really kind of too positive, but let me finish. If possible, try to isolate yourself from the chaos surrounding you. Now is the time for you to feel any pain that you have previously suppressed so that you can heal. So maybe it is that what I end up doing at the funerals is dumping dumping grief from everyday life um, within a particular, within a setting in which that I suppose is more acceptable than otherwise. Although, I'm home alone most of the time. There's no reason I couldn't cry all night or something if I needed to. Um, the universe has plans and opportunities that are better than you can imagine, so let go and trust and anticipate what is coming. So it might be saying that I kind of need an attitude adjustment and, kind of a 5 of Cup things, not focus so much on what is lost. All right, so how did this come out? So for number 2, these two popped out of the deck. And this was when I was finished and pulled from the top. I was finished shuffling. And if I recall correctly, these two make more sense. So, what dark aspect of life am I avoiding when I fail to acknowledge the smaller griefs and pains of everyday life? And this one's pretty obvious. You have to put a mask on it. People don't want to see that stuff. Especially if there's nothing really that they can do for you. If something's going on that, it's beyond your control and their control. Yeah. And then this I'm not so sure about, except that, of course, the home is where these smaller griefs can occur. So let me look at these two and see. I mean, I see this making sense, but I don't see these two making very much sense. So let me see. What is 35 is home. All right. How do you keep recreating home? In the context of this teaching, let's use the word home to describe your unconscious ability to attract intimate partners with the positive and negative qualities your parents instilled in you. This card honors the wounded child in you that keeps recreating home, hoping to get your childhood developmental codependency needs met. You might even provoke the other to act or look like your original parent. So this to me, would harken back to what I said about past lives. When I explored this problem I have with death, cards like the plague came up, So that's a lot of dying. That's a lot of helplessness. So these are almost home triggers, home emotional triggers coming on here. And so maybe that's what it's saying, that it is kind of out of my control and part of a pattern. Um, in a world where so many of our natural emotions were not encouraged and, worse yet, suppressed, you are now encouraged to feel the feelings trapped inside you and that consistently sabotage your life. Well, actually, I wouldn't say that this sabotages my life. But it's giving the solution. You know, you're encouraged to feel the feelings trapped inside you. Now, I don't feel like there's an overwhelming amount, but that could just be that I'm really good at suppressing. I am a Cancer, so there is that shell helping me out there. And then it just goes on. For some of us, home was an amazing, empowering, and happy place, which in this lifetime, for the most part, it was. But for most of us, it was lacking. There was unease and hurt. And again, that would be true in the past lives. This is imprinted on your nervous system, which forces the dysfunction you had with your parents to rise to the surface with your current partner and people close to you. But I could also see that in the habit of not acknowledging griefs, that in our home that we didn't dwell on that. And so maybe it's one of those things gotten from parents or a parent that may have worked for them. I'm not going to say they were bad or whatever, or it was wrong of them. In other words, that they didn't show grief, or they dismissed when things would go wrong. If it wasn't tragically wrong, then it wasn't tragically wrong, and so you just move on with things. That could very well have been an attitude of my parents that that I just adopted. So let's see, entrapment. You see there's a ghouly dude here. This one made the least sense. These made more sense. But let's look at him. He's 34. All right. What do we have? We have 34 and 35 and 11. Okay, 34. You are letting too many things in your environment control your life. You have drawn this card because it is time for a shift in personal power. You are encouraged to take responsibility for your life and choose new ways of thinking that create change. The reality is that for you to make the changes you want, need, and desire, you need a system, daily discipline, and motivation. As long as you blame outside influences for any circumstances in your life, you are powerless. It's the government, your abusive background, the interest rates, and the bank's fault. The system that many ultra successful people use is they read books every day, listen to audios, go to as many seminars as they can, practice recognizing others' accomplishments, and form relationships with like-minded people. Why that last paragraph is in there is really beyond me. Unless they're saying to focus on something else. So this seems to be kind of a victim mentality. And I do see this as a negative, a dark aspect. The way they've described it is essentially a suck it up card. Um, not allowing for grief or sorrow. Even if you do take responsibility for your life, you can make some tragic decisions or very unfortunate decisions that land you in a place where you're maybe entrapped, maybe not. Um, and it's almost saying here that it's like if you are the one in power, then you can't cry over your mistakes. And I disagree with that. But I can see how that would be a voice in my head. I can see how that would be a voice in my head. It's like, well, it is what it is, and I am in control of my life being a single person. I don't have too many people I can blame. Um, and so maybe that is the road I go down, is it's like, all right, well, that happened, and um, live and learn. Yeah, I don't know. The last brief question is, what grief do I need to process now that I'm in denial of? So far, I feel like I managed to make some sense of the phoenix rising, but these things, they are proving a challenge when it comes to these grief questions. But I feel like each deck is kind of an equal challenge, so maybe I'll have to find a separate deck for grief. Um, and there's another challenge I don't have to think about. I don't want to have to go back through all those decks and ask all of the grief questions. But I might go back, not necessarily on air here as a recording, but I may go back through some of them. Like with all of the tear streaks in the dark fairy tale, that one might be a good one to ask. That there might be the Heal Yourself cards, as I've mentioned before, they have another purpose. I really got them as one card draw in um, a romance reading for some stuff that's not evident. But if I find something that works better with these three questions than the dark mirror, then essentially there is no reason for me to keep that dark mirror deck, especially. All right, so what do we have here? This is something that I need to process now that I'm in denial of. So where was the inner child? Didn't we have the inner child in the dark? In one of the definitions of the dark mirror, weren't they addressing the child? It shows you my memory. It's gone. Let me do 10. Pay attention to the signs. And this card came up for the dark deck interview as well. But do I remember it? No. I think this was for my career here. But here we are again. It's a grief that I need to go through. So maybe it's a grief somehow associated with my career or work. Let's take a look. Signs are all around you. Open your mind and pay close attention to your environment. Your angels know that you have been feeling lost about the direction you need to take in your life and the decisions you need to make. So maybe this is a grief about poor decisions, those decisions that turned you in a direction that made you really unhappy in the end, but then you get stuck, that kind of thing. They have heard your frustrations and your pleas for help. They ask you to slow down, stop focusing on the problem, and allow a solution to come into your reality. So here's jumping immediately into solutions, which is the spiritual helpers. Instead of saying anything more about the problem, but I think I do get that problem. Just the way I would take this at this point would be grief over past decisions made that have had a long-lasting negative impact on my life. So maybe I need to grieve over my own errors, essentially, which does reflect back to some extent on the previous reading that was talking about responsibility. The previous question, previous cards that came up. So the inner child as a grief. Your inner child is urging you to lighten up a little bit, get out of your comfort zone and have fun. And I confess I have not been having fun. I have very brief interludes of fun with my animals. So this might just be saying, to grieve the lack of fun and carefree that I have in my life. And I could easily pair this with the dark mirror where it was talking about my body, because it is my body that is preventing me from playing, from doing the things that to me would be playing. The fatigue and weakness for one, but also the fact that, I'm, undeniably sensitive to the diseases that ticks carry. And ticks are everywhere. Even when I think of like letting Rufus out for a run, there's a neighboring field that I thought I might do that in, and then I thought, there's going to be ticks out there, and either I'm going to pick them up or Rufus is going to pick them up. And I've already had a situation where I got a tick on me at my parents' house that had to have come from one of their dogs during a walk, and then they're on the couch, they're little dogs, and I sleep on the couch and I wake up with a tick, that kind of thing. So yeah, it really is, makes indulging the inner child really difficult. And I think I'll leave it at that. This is just sort of more of that sort of thing. I think that's it. So maybe it would work better. I don't feel a strong desire to let go of either of these decks at this point. In fact, what I was saying about the inner child and what I had from the dark mirror, maybe it was this one. No, it's the body. It was this one. That maybe it's helpful to use these two together. Double darkness, right there. And I think that does work fairly well. Because this is even pay attention to the signs. And this, I'm always having to watch my body. I'm always having to monitor. And that's annoying as all get out. That is not my general modus operandi. It is not natural to me. But I'm always having to monitor, or I don't monitor, and suddenly something flares up, and I'm, where did this come from? Why? Or I have a good day. I had a pretty good day today, and it's like, but why? You know, I can't replicate it because I'm not sure why. There's nothing extraordinary about the previous 24 hours that would have set me up to have a good day. So, it's frustrating. So let's look at the other one. So this, as a set, would have worked really well. They suddenly become clear. So let me see what happens with the other ones. So what else did I have? I had the Parasite, and then I had these things. I mean, I suppose the Parasite could be a type of entrapment. And kind of entrapment in a home or a pattern from childhood. I think it's not as easy a general combination as the last question, as these three together make a lot of sense. But I see how it could add to it. So that's interesting. And then this card with this card. In this case, I feel like with these two together, it is saying that there's another way to look at it. So it's almost like saying, this is your bad attitude right now. This is it. And this is an attitude to adopt, to move toward. So within this card, if it were reversed, it would almost mean this. There's the suffering and then you die. You know, and everybody else around you suffers because of your death. Certainly, I absolutely believe that it's, despite the grief that people still feel deeply, when somebody has been a burden to you, passes away. But, you know, I do believe that there is a relief there, and I think it's valid, and there's nothing wrong with that, having that. So yeah, I'm really not inclined to get rid of either of these decks, and I think I've just discovered that they actually reinforce one another. If, you know, if I'm going down the grief road, then using these decks together, I think, will be more illuminating. And I might take out the dark fairy tale at some point and throw that in the mix too, and just think of them as a set of cards for understanding and processing grief, not just, and I wasn't getting dark decks thinking about grief, except for the dark mirror, because that's its focus. But anyway, so there's all that. There's all that. So very interesting, but it's not ending up the way I kind of thought it might, which would have been letting the dark mirror go. I think it works well with the Heal Yourself reading cards. And off camera here, I will probably pull out the dark fairy tale and see if it plays well with these two. Yeah, interesting. All right, everybody, that's the end of that. And again, I don't intend to have any other dark deck interviews or roundups or anything. I think this is the end of this exploration for me. I hope you found it interesting, um, and helps you determine what decks you have that you consider dark decks. And um, I wouldn't have thought to combine dark decks because that would have been just too dark. But it seems to be working, so that opens up that possibility for anybody else who had never thought of it before. Um, yeah, and always feel free to share. And thanks so much for for watching. If you stay with me this long, clearly it's time for bed for me. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.